am your host. I am the founder of Prud'homme Beer Certification, Canada's beer certification program, and one of 3 or 4 sommelier programs around the world, of which we think ours is the best, hands down. That's pretty easy to say. So all kinds of new things in the world these days. Not as many new breweries popping up, but a few here and there. And we saw recently a little venture by Molson Coors, which offered up the opportunity for Canada Day for a bunch of small brewers to get involved in their 24-pack, which was a really good initiative, I thought. And I saw some more things on social media today which were really positive, and some of the small brewers were ultimately extremely thankful that they got to participate in something like that, because sometimes they don't have the marketing dollars to be able to support new initiatives that would go forward. So hope everybody is well. It's been excessively hot in Ontario, and we're seeing it right across the country. This great country that we have, and there's a ton of cool things happening. I think we're going to have a really good hop harvest in Ontario this year, because we've got all this wonderful sunshine and lots of heat, and that's what hops really need. On top of that, I think the barley crop was out west, from what I understood, needed a touch more sunshine, a little less rain, and I think they were getting that. Good day, Harold, and hello, Vess. Vess has just recently signed up for my level 2 class, which I'm going to be personally facilitating. Keith is back from summer vacay. That's nice. Thanks for joining as well. So we've got lots of cool things going on. I'm going to start going through a small branding change in the future. Hello, Annie. I think what we're going to do is we're going to adopt more of a maple leaf logo that's attached into our certificate logos as well. So every different stage is going to have some form of maple leaf. We've conceptualized it, but we haven't really seen anything yet. So we're going to really start focusing more on our ability to be Canadian focused and not being built in other countries, because we think in Canada we do some of the best things in the world. I think everybody is going to agree with that. So lots of things coming up. Hello, Craig. We've got we're starting back. I mean, Toronto's heading into stage 3 on Friday, and we're starting to plan all of our classes. So we have a pretty good class load starting in September, with level 3s, level 2s, a level 4 starting as well, which is full now, and some more level 2s and level 1s that are popping up as well. So pretty enthusiastic about that. Also, we're now doing level 1 and level 2 that are hybrid courses, both online with webinar tastings and question and answer periods that are going to run once a week. So it's going to be more of a virtual classroom than anything else. So pretty excited about what the future holds. Still have to try to figure out in the long run how I'm going to do a level 3 online. That's something that I've been doing some thinking about, but I've got to get more into what kind of costs are associated with that. So pretty excited about what's going on. I've seen some cool beers. Small brewery in Toronto was just announced that it had just very quietly closed. Hello, Rebecca and Bry. It was called The Six, and it started up last year and very quietly closed. But what's happened in the meantime is Collective Arts, one of the larger Ontario breweries that does a really phenomenal job of combining both art and beer, is opening a tap room and brew pub up in the same spot as The Six. So I think a lot of people are really excited about that. A lot of people really like Collective Arts beers. Do a lot of really interesting things. Nothing very standard in my eyes, which is fine. Like, there's lots of really good beers out there. Seen some really cool tongue-in-cheek things lately. I forget who it was. It was somebody in Toronto had this really interesting tongue-in-cheek lager that they were launching. I think it was Bellwoods, and I forget it had something to do with something wiser. So you can figure that one out. So website's coming along nicely. No real big changes on that, but lots of classroom coming up in the future, and I'm looking forward to seeing people, obviously in a safe manner, but we still have to get going on that and get a few more people. We're going to drop our class sizes. So we used to have a maximum of 12. We're now going to a max of 8 to ensure that everybody's safe and well treated and that we've got lots of adequate space between us. And it's going to be an interesting future. I hope that our hospitality industry rebounds. I hope our travel and tourism industry rebounds. There's so much uncertainty out there that I think that we all have to maintain a real positive outlook and do the best that we possibly can. So having said that, today we're featuring porters. And porters are a really, really unique style. I absolutely love porters, love stouts. I think in one of my messages on social media, I talked about, some people think, aka LCBO, believes that porters and stouts are primarily beers that you consume in the fall or cold months. But porters are wonderful all year round, and they're phenomenal to have with foods because they have such rich, dark, complex flavors to them. So I'm going to pour. I've got a London Porter with me today. This is my favorite from a standard perspective, and I've got it. It's 5.4%. It's from the brewery called Fuller's, and Fuller's is a London brewery. It is now owned by Asahi. Asahi purchased the Fuller's brewery, I think, in 2018 or 19, and I'm sure that that's going to be a very positive thing in the future. Japanese brewers typically do a wonderful job of creating a little bit more control over the scientific environment and don't really affect the creative control that has always been there in that particular brewery. I'm using this glass today. There's a lot of different glasses that you can use. I think the standard English pint glass is probably very, very typical. A shaker glass would be good, which is the straight-sided glass that you see a lot. I thought about using a Guinness glass, and then I thought I really want to use this glass because this glass is going to bring out all the flavor profiles that I want. It's going to bring out all that really nice intensity. It's going to let me warm it up a little bit. So give it a good pour. And then have a good look at it. The interesting thing about porters is they've got this beautiful cappuccino colored foam on the top. It's just stunning. It's really tight bubbles, not really highly carbonated. And when you look at it, it actually looks completely black. But if you've got good lighting at home, London and 3 threads, one in each hand, excellent. We'll get into what 3 threads is in a second. This is 3 threads here. So this one is by Magnata, which is typically known for its wines, but has been brewing for quite a long time in Vaughan. And that porter is exceptional. It's a really good porter. They've done a beautiful job on it. So anyway, back to the color. If you get good light in behind this, what happens is it doesn't look as black as it does on the screen right now. It actually looks like it's ruby red and mahogany tones. It's got these beautiful wood notes with hints of red in it. It is crystal clear. These beers are meant to be crystal clear. Yeah, you're gonna like that, Craig. It's a really nice beer. Again, British brewers typically always filter and always get into some really nice clarity. So it's hard to see when it's really dark because you can't notice it that much. But these are the forefathers of stouts. And therefore, they're probably a little lighter and easier to drink. They probably have a little bit more sweetness associated with them. When you smell them, you definitely get chocolate, coffee. But for me right now, because of this glass, I'm getting a massive amount of dark fruits, starting with cherries and moving on to figs, dates, plums, prunes. Yeah, there's some really nice fruity sweetness in here. Dark breads, definitely, so more on the sourdough pumpernickel side because there is a bit of acidity in porters. A possible hint of smokiness in there. It's not In porters, the smoke and the coffee and the roasted characteristics are put on the back burner. Those are left for stouts. It's just a fabulous smelling beer. It's got all these rich complexities, and when you put it into a glass like that, it just blossoms out because I've got all this width, which is going to bring all the aromatics out. Man, that's good. You know, a lot of times, and I've mentioned this in some of my previous videos, but a lot of times we drink with our eyes, and a lot of people have this belief that when you're drinking a beer this dark, it's going to be filling and you're not really going to want more. But with the lower carbon dioxide that's in British beers, this is a very, very smooth and easy drinking beer. Lots of coffee notes in the taste. A little less fruit in the flavor profile. That's mainly on the aromatics. And in the taste, getting lots of mild coffee and some really nice dark chocolate. And the aftertaste, it's got sort of a moderate finish, a little longer aftertaste, but the aftertaste is chocolate all the way through for me. I haven't had this in a long time, and it's just fabulous. So I think I might have to drink the whole thing before we finish tonight. So let's talk a little bit about porters. They have a really interesting history. Martin, hello. No luck. You should have reminded me. I would have brought you one last week. I had a few here. Martin is the executive chef at Lake of Bays Brew House in Huntsville and the new Barrel House, which is opening up in Bracebridge, which I'm excited to see when it's finally open. We did some training for them last week. Martin's an exceptional chef. Keith's an exceptional chef. We've got all these great cooks online. I don't know about the rest of you. So anyway, let's get back to the story of porters. So really, really interesting history, and a lot of it is not well documented. So there's a lot of speculation as to what actually happened and what the truth is. So we're going to dance a little bit around that. It's kind of interesting that back in those days, porters were basically a blend of beers. They were originally called 3 threads, and a thread is a third. So the sea porters and the land porters, which were the people that were doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the towns, after a hard day's work would often go into the pub to have a beer, and they were given something called 3 threads, which eventually became renamed as a porter. So 3 threads were a third split between ale, beer, and something called 2 penny. So let's deal with ale first. Ales had long been named without hops, and it was Henry VIII that outlawed hops. He thought hops were an aphrodisiac and were the devil's work, so hops went by the wayside. So that created a new style called beer, and beer was a hopped, what we know now as a beer. So a third ale, no hops, a third beer with hops, and the 2 penny was higher alcohol. It was something that had been aged, and 2 penny referred to the amount of taxation that was always applied to higher alcohol beers. So these beers typically in that range would have been somewhere around 6.6% alcohol by volume. Now the interesting thing about all beers during that time is they were always shipped to the pub fresh. They were never aged in the brewery, and that's a significant story when we get to what actually happened and how this style moved from being something in the pub, a beer blend, if you will, to something that was created in the actual brewery itself. So things are going along, and the porters are really enjoying these beers, but it's really viewed to be more of a common drink than anything else. So it's not really part of the aristocracy. It's not really part of of the royalty. They're drinking other things, typically brown ales. So into the 1700s, around 1721, what happened was these beers started being brewed in a brewery, and there's one particular fellow who is getting a lot of the credit, but it depends on what you read. Some people don't believe that he was really the one who invented it. Most of the things that I've read point to this man named Ralph Harwood, who was in a suburb of London called Shoreditch, And he was the one that basically took the concept of 3 threads and then developed it as a recipe in the brewery. The other unique thing that he did was, or they did, whoever you want to believe, whether it was Whitbread, which was a brewer, or Marston's, or even Fuller's, somewhere along that way, what they did was they aged the beer in the brewery, and it became the first beer that was actually aged in a brewery in England. So when they went to the pubs, they were already fully aged and fully matured. So you got something that was a little higher alcohol. The belief at that point was that the alcohol on these porters, because it was viewed both nutritious, but people wanted something that was a little bit more soothing at the end of the day, was around 6.6% alcohol by volume, which was really, really high in those times. I mean, a lot of beers probably would have been 2.5%, 3%. It also made porters fantastic for shipping. So a lot of porters found their way down into India, started being traded along the Baltic route, and that's where we found Baltic porters eventually, was that these higher alcohol beers needed to be high alcohol, because if you're sailing across the Baltic in cold months, very likely that the beer would have frozen beneath the ship. So with higher alcohol, it actually sustained the journey. Eventually, Baltic porters started using more lager fermentations, so cold fermentations, and they typically have a slightly different yeast. And it just opens up so nicely when it warms up, and it gets a little bit of oxidation in there. It just really pops out. So these first beers that were produced in London, because porter is a London style, were called entires. And it was like the entire butt. A butt is a very large keg. So the entire beer was a porter at that time. And then eventually they changed the name to porter, because that's really who was drinking a lot of it. And then as we move on into history, what we find is that they start making them a little bit stronger, a little bit more full-bodied, and they start calling them stout porters or robust porters. And then the word porter just got dropped, and that's how porters evolved into stouts. The other really cool thing was, so initially at 6.6% alcohol, these were really strong beers. And then what happened was the Napoleonic Wars. In the Napoleonic Wars and any of the wars that subsequently happened, in order to fund the war effort, the royalty or the monarchy imposed a tax on alcohol. And brewers, being rather stubborn in that way, didn't really want to pay the queen her due and didn't want to pay the taxes. So what ended up happening was the alcohol content started going down and down and down, where porters now became lower than 5%, and were still viewed to be high alcohol. But porters are now not really in the high alcohol category. That would be a Baltic porter or an imperial stout. So back in the day, high alcohol. Now, not so much. But it really has everything to do with taxation, a lot of taxation. And then eventually, what Arthur Guinness started brewing porters in the Guinness brewery, because that's what he had brewed in London. But what they started doing was not even using malts anymore. They just started using roasted barley, because malts contributed to the alcohol content and therefore increased the taxation. So, quick down and dirty story. It's a great thing to have these beers. London Porter really is, for me, the true to style standard of this category. There's lots of really good ones out there. There's a really nice brewery in Hamilton, Ontario called Clifford. Brad Clifford has always made a phenomenal porter. He's won numerous awards in the Ontario and Canadian Brewing Awards for his porter. I'm quite enamored with this 3 threads. I think it's really nice. If you put 3 threads against London Porter, hands down, I take this one every time. Yeah, just so good. It's really soothing. You'd almost want something. I know a lot of people, when they drink these things, they can envision sitting around a fire, and I think, in the middle of summer, if you're having a campfire, cool. Like nothing like a porter to share with at the end of the night when you're watching a beautiful Canadian starry sky with a fire in front of you. But also great when we start hitting in the fall and we start getting colder weather. to just sit around, and it's really warming and comforting, and it's great with food. You can do it with a lot of different foods. You can do it with desserts, chocolate desserts, quite obviously, anything with some fruit in it, because that's a really nice contrast. They separate really nicely. Obviously, any kind of meats, this is good, or anything with some umami in it, soy sauce, hoisin, those kind of things. There's all kinds of really cool things to do with it. Obviously great with a burger because they just match so well with the chard characteristics. But I hope you go out and you enjoy porters at any time of the year and not just during the fall. So I'm going to open it up to any questions that anybody might have or any comments that you might have. I want to thank you again for joining me. It's I really have a lot of fun doing these things. And we're getting to a stage where we're getting down the list on some brands. I'll tell you what we're going to do next week in a few minutes, but we are going to take some breaks from time to time. I think I'm going to miss the last week in August, and now that we're heading into August, which is totally unbelievable, it seems like this year has just flown by. We still have lots of good things to have. It went well with salmon and horseradish. Okay. Yeah, I get that. You know what, the interesting thing I think with the salmon is that a lot of times if you've got, and I don't know, Craig, whether you had fresh salmon that you cooked or whether it was smoked salmon, because if it's smoked, I can really see how these two would go together, because that's a real big compliment, and it probably tones down some of the spice of the horseradish, because this has got a lot of things going on. So any questions at all from anybody about anything? Doesn't have to be porters, it could be anything about beer. Yeah, Martin, we talked really quickly about a level 3 course, and I'll send you an email as soon as I can tomorrow morning, and then we can talk a little bit. We'll set up a time to actually have a chat and see if I can get you into the weekend sessions. There's about 4 people in the weekend sessions right now. I can take up to 8. Do I think Sabro is here to stay? What's Sabro? I'm just totally confused what a Sabro is. That's a good question, but I have no idea how to answer you. I'll wait for you to type that in. Should be, a hop. I'll be honest, I have no idea what that particular hop is or characteristics. Going to, I'll get to yours in a sec. Juicy tropical hop that everybody seems to be using. If you want my opinion, I think it's probably not going to last very long, because one of the things that we're starting to see is that new hop varieties come up all the time, and then brewers start flipping to those really quickly. So there's a lot of innovation and crossbreeding going on in hops, but it takes 6 years in the breeding process to create a new hop, so it's a big investment. A lot of the things that I'm seeing in social media is a massive disdain for a lot of these juicy IPAs. They're just too filling and too juicy, and so I think a lot of people are going down that path right now. It's kind of like sours. So I think what will happen is we'll see an end, and we'll see more traditional and noble hops, because they typically stick around a little bit more. So Vess, you're doing a side-by-side with 3 Threads, which doesn't seem to be as chocolatey. I would argue the same thing. We did this a little while ago in one of my classes, And I really like the three threads all on its own, but as soon as you start doing a side to side with something like London Porter, it doesn't stand up to the depth and the complexity of that particular beer. So sometimes when we're doing side by sides or head to heads, one overshadows the other, and that's something that's really, really natural, and you're going to find out in level 2 when you join me. Way to go, Harold. New highly anticipated hop variety. I like everybody's gonna jump on board. The problem is you need some big brewers to be on board with that Sabro hop in order for it to be continued. Cascade is still the #1 hop variety in the United States, and everything that I've seen, there's a group that I follow called the Bart Haas group, and they're hop growers and distributors in the I haven't said yet, Dan. They're hop growers and distributors in Germany, and they do a lot of research and development, and everything is pointing in the direction of more aromatic hops as opposed to more bittering hops. The other thing on juicy tropical hop, one of the things that I found out recently is the Vermont ale yeast. Actually, there are certain ale yeasts that drive that tropical fruit note, and it isn't always just the hop that's doing it. Sometimes it's the yeast that's creating those tropical fruits like pineapple, mango, papaya, passion fruit. Those things are part of the yeast portfolio as well as hop portfolio. So my feeling is it's probably going to come, and we'll see how many people adopt it. You have to know that every craft brewer in the world is going to pick it up, and that's going to be in their portfolio, and then it's again, everything's the same as it always is. Dan, Bess, good comment. Three threads, not as smooth. I would argue the same thing. I think it's bitter. It doesn't have the same soft, smooth finish that London Porter has. Next week, I am going to take a look at Hefeweizens or Weiss beers. So we'll get a few different ones that I'll show you, and I'm going to focus mainly on what's going on in Bavaria, so we can take a look at two particularly different styles if I can go and find them. The one that I'm going to feature will be Weihenstephan. Weihenstephan is the oldest active brewery in the world. It dates back to 1040. And it has records of hops being delivered to the door of the monastery in 700 AD. So there's some really interesting history behind those. Other questions? See if I'm missing anything anywhere up there. Not yet. Some of your favorite styles are the Vermont style IPAs or hazy IPAs, Martin. I think you were saying that. I think a lot of people love IPAs. I think a lot of people are now going to start getting tired of it. I had one that I was explaining to, I think, your class at Lake of Bays. I had one a little while ago, and maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to see if I could go back to it, because there's something for me off-putting in something that I completely can't see through because it looks like juice. So I opened this can of beer, and the aromatics were unbelievable. All tropical fruit, was really inviting. I took a sip. Okay, that was decent. And then my mouth started getting fuller and fuller and fuller, and the bitterness started coming out. I had about 2 or 3 sips. I just realized that visually, it wasn't doing it for me. There was something lacking that was enticing me. I think a lot of people do that, but I'm just giving you my personal 2 cents. So some cool things going on in the beer industry. I think that hopefully we'll settle out. I think a lot of brewers. I think there was a lot of speculation at the beginning that we were going to shed. Some people said anywhere between 30 and 50% of the brewers in Canada were going to close shop because of 2020. But I don't think so. A lot of the brewers that I've spoken to have found a renewed resurgence within the community and within curbside deliveries and pickup and retail. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing as we move forward. I think Canada is built because of its web of small breweries to actually continue to be successful, because they're not that big, and they haven't expanded so rapidly that they're in financial constraints. So for me, I'm looking forward to see how we all come out of the next little while, and with that, I'm gonna wrap it up shortly. Just a reminder, if you can, make sure that you send some likes along at YouTube. Tell other people about it. Tell everybody that you possibly can. We have classes going on, primarily in the GTA. Yeah, Craig, good comment. Online orders, pickup, delivery. It is great to see. Your beer budget went up, Keith. I'm sure everybody. I think we've seen a decline in beer industry in Canada in volume. In the last 3 to 4 years, it's always been a real steady, small decline. I think at the end of 2020, we're actually going to see beer sales have picked up, and it's because when we get into situations where anxiety rises, consumption rises at the same time. So I think we're probably all spending a little bit more on beer. I know my consumption has probably increased because I was sitting down here and didn't have a ton to do. But everything's coming back to normal. So again, next week is going to be Vice Beers. I'm going to feature Vine Stefan. I'll post it in the next day or so that you can make sure that you know. I'll give you some other ideas of things to drink. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of local breweries that are making good Vice Beers. The only one that I would strongly recommend is Side Launch Wheat, and it's good. It's good for being a local brewer, but it really doesn't, in my eyes, stand up to German Weiss beers, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Let everybody know. Make sure that you also let them know there's tons of other stuff on the YouTube channel. We're on Facebook, on Instagram, and then of course we've got our classes running both virtually and in person all the time. So starting in September, classes are back up and running again. Keith, by the way, is I'm sure you're still at Fanshawe. Fanshawe is a huge supporter of Prud'homme beer certification, and I really appreciate them taking their students through our program. So having said that, thanks once again for joining me. Hope you enjoyed our session